Thanks for taking the time to come to my talk. So, I've maybe, like many of you, I've been curious. So, if you're doing platform engineering or platform operations or SRE or DevOps or whatever you might want to call running the stack of stuff that you do to support the developers in your organization who are writing software to help run your organization. What is the workload of AI, or you can think of it as generative AI if you want. I get my terminology all mixed up, so, sorry about that. But I'm just going to say AI because it's faster. So when you're running that service and helping developers out in a kind of platform engineering stance, like what do you do? What's interesting and new? And this talk is there's I need a better word than paradox, but there's a bit of a problem with it in that if you look at it, it's, I don't know, you do all the same stuff you would do for any middleware or service. Like you run it and figure out planning it out and making it work well for the developers that you have. But then the issue with it is like all of this stuff is so new that there's very few people who actually have done it. So we don't know if that's true or what works. And I've tried to collect together and talking with people and looking what other folks are doing. I don't have any firsthand experience. I just make slides and things like that. But I've tried to gather this stuff up to start figuring out what it looks like. So it'd be interesting to hear from y'all if you have more experience or have heard notions of what is out there. But I'm going to go over what the obvious practices look like that people have talked about. And then I think because it's so early on in this, I think there's a lot of more ways of thinking about it and sense making and mindset sort of stuff that I think is important to have as we're all figuring it out. So first of all, every now and then I think it's great to start with the actual conclusions. So if you don't enjoy the rest, at least you have that. This is a rough collection when I've looked across this and talked with people of what it is platform engineers do to support running AI stuff in their organization. And again, like I was saying, it's obvious in the way that it's just running another, I'm older, so I like to say workload, despite having never worked on mainframes, but running a service or a workload or whatever you want to call it, a piece of middleware, there's another ancient term. But then there's a few things that are peculiar or unique to what you have with running inference or running your own models. I don't really go over like training and stuff like that. But you can look through this list and see that it's similar things. Now, there are things that are analogous but specific to doing AI stuff, like running registries, whether it's, you can think of however you want to use a word registry for the actual models that you're using or the various little plugins. Of course, model context protocol stuff nowadays. Who knows what we'll have next? But you have that there in the same way that you would be running, hopefully, a registry of containers that you have and other approved things. And then I guess maybe the most unique thing, which I don't think is quite sorted out, is who or what group has responsibility or involvement in doing the various safety things and just basic evaluating of figuring out if their responses are good or not. That feels like a service that would run in your platform, but who knows, right? Like who kind of sets that up and who goes through that. So this seems like a very not high level, but it's a good laundry list, a good collection of what those practices are. And I think the other thing that comes out when you talk with people is thinking about what the roles and responsibilities are, who does what. And let's see, to get out of your way here, here we list like what the usual platform engineering or whatever you want to call it, like roles and responsibilities are across the application developer team. Remember the people writing the applications, the platform team, and you can see there's some combination or sorting out of what the AI team does. People I talk with call this the data scientist, which sounds awesome and cool. So maybe I'll use that phrase instead of AI team. One of those sounds neater than the other. But you can see the developer teams, they're using it, right? And from a platform way, of course, they want it to be easy to use and self-service. They're going to have to integrate it with other things, if you'll pardon the phrase, in the enterprise that they want to use in the rest of the organization. And then you get to the area of probably platform people are running the models. Do they update them? Maybe. And as always, they tend to be the point of actually being responsible for spend and enforcing security and policy. And then we get over towards the other area here, which is more, people wear a lot of purple over there, as you can see, but it's more the notion of like, how do we evaluate the models? I guess that's an overloaded term in this area. How do we figure out which models we want to be using that matches to the business need that we have? And how do we select the various ones? And I think the notion, again, to use the cooler phrase, I think the data scientists, they seem like the people who should be doing this, because I don't know if you've ever run a platform before. I obviously haven't, as I stated before, but it seems like you're already pretty busy, right? Like you don't have a lot of time to go figure out what all that nonsense on Hugging Face means and how to map it to your business. And maybe you want the AI team to do it for you. This is like a early like cut of who does what and what the responsibilities are. And you can see that at the bottom. I think for developers it's obvious, but for the platform and the data scientists, the AI team, things are going a little like back and forth or being sorting out. So this is me as an introduction before I get to the rest. That's me up there. I've been lucky to work at Pivotal, and then we were part of VMware, and then we were VMware Tanzu by Broadcom, and now we are Tanzu by Broadcom for the past 10 years. And I've got a chance, I mostly work and talk with like larger organizations about this kind of stuff. What are you doing to use software in your organization to get better at it? If you remember the 2010s, the glorious era of digital transformation, there was lots of conversation about what we're going to do to get better at software. Remember all those tech companies were going to kill off the regular companies? And thankfully, for the stability of my bank account, they did fine. But I've talked with organizations about doing that a lot, and I had a good chance to write some books. I've been an analyst and a programmer, things like that. And I have 2 podcasts that are fun to do. As one of my friends like to say, engage with my brand. Moving on. Like I was saying, at this stage in, I don't know, thinking about how we're going to be doing something, figuring it out, adding a new responsibility that we have, I think it's important to look at a lot of things. And also in a presentation like this for me to acknowledge that like, I really have just been saying what other people have been saying. I haven't come up with very much here at all. So in a situation like that, I like to assign homework or acknowledgments and references. And I think if you were to go over, obviously after my talk to set the context of what's going on, but then if you were to go look at these, I think you'll get a pretty good idea of the state of the art. I guess you can't talk to our customers and internal use, although you probably could. You could ask me, I'll introduce you to them if they want to talk. But this is a pretty good collection of what people who have more firsthand experience are doing. And I think in particular, I don't know if he actually does have firsthand experience, but if you look at those 2 by Patrick Dubois, Mr. DevOps in the middle there, he does a fantastic job in these 2 presentations of really, I'm going to show you a little bit of this, but showing you what the stack is. The kind of, if you know the CNCF landscape, he kind of shows you the equivalent of that for doing AI engineering stuff, which he has made up. And then the other one that I want to point out that's really interesting is this one by Angie Jones at Block, formerly Square. I guess they went 3-dimensional. And like, this is an interesting overview that I'll mention a little bit about probably a new type of workload a new type of user, and therefore thing that you're managing for platform engineers. And I think, I don't know, my theory is this is it'll probably be fine for the next 12 or 24 months of what you're doing in the form of this cool app, the open source app they have called Goose. So you should check those out. They're good if you're interested in this topic for figuring out what's going on. So the first thing is, I think a lot of, not all of it, but I think most of what a platform engineer would be doing when it comes to supporting AI in their organization probably has to do with supporting running their own AI things. Now, of course, you would provide and gate access to public AI things as well. Doing that isn't, in theory, a lot of work, right? But once you are running things on premises, if you prefer, or in private cloud, if you don't mind being super technical in your definitions, or accurate, I should say. Everyone here probably likes to be super technical. When you do these surveys, this is one from IDC, that a lot of people, at least those surveyed, they're primarily looking to run AI things on premises, under their control, right? So if you're in that situation, definitely some sort of platform engineer, someone is going to be involved, a lot of people involved in helping you run it. I don't really know what edge is in this context. I assume it means you're also responsible for running it. So whether you look at however you want to add the purple and the red up or whatever, it's at least half, if not slightly over. So there's a fair amount of it there. And I think a lot of the practices come from that notion that you're running the platform instead of just wrapping around other people's platforms. So just as a quick refresher, and then to go into what this platform starts looking like, as I'm sure you can't have a talk that has anything to do with platform engineering without having this 2018 definition from Evan Botcher in it, which is great. Him and ThoughtWorks wrote that up a while ago. So I've had it. I can check it off the list. Let's move on. So what you probably know platform is doing, and if you had enough time to read that quote, if you haven't read it 5 times over the years, is over here, you have the CNCF's platform reference architecture, which is great because now I can show what a platform is without people being like, oh, you're showing vendor slides, which I do here. But you look at this and that idea of a platform being for your internal developers, making it very easy for them to operate, and also giving you the things that are needed to run it. You can see that in what's here, right? Everything you would expect. The kind of middleware services sorts of things, even the interfaces for developers to get into there, the security, all the stuff that you need in a stack, rather than just combining that stuff together into an accidental platform. You have hopefully a mindfully, purposely built platform there, right? Now, of course, I'm sure you are aware of the best platform available in all of the galaxy, the VMware Tanzu platform based on Cloud Foundry. But I'll move on so as not to sully with any attempts to make sure I'm paid well each month. Now, this is, speaking of platform, this is from PlatformCon this summer. And this is one collection, I don't know who, between the Lucas guy here and other people, who put this together. But this is an interesting sort of, what would you call it? Almost end-to-end notion and activity way of looking at what is you would be doing with AI in a platform. Because it tries to cover, I think, from, let's see, your left to my right. That doesn't make sense. Your left to your right. It covers the activities of the various people involved, right? So you see what developers would be up to. You see this kind of intermediate thing of developers needing to use other data and services in their organization. I suppose you could have some AI stuff that didn't interact with anything in your organization, but that doesn't seem like it would be as valuable as you would want to. So you're thinking about how it interacts with other things, and then we get into the kind of purely AI stuff, right? And then, of course, all your usual stuff surrounding it. Here, you're starting to see the new things you would be doing with the platform, trying to overlay it and position it with the existing platform stuff. Now, and also from the same conference, you can see Gartner's idea of what's going on. What's great about a Gartner burger or cake or sandwich like this, or stack if you prefer, is they do a pretty good job of mixing together the groups, the people in the organization with the technology that they're using. And then also the, as I think you would say, the business objectives, the goals that you're trying to achieve, the outcomes. And so here again, you can see this notion of, it has a very platformy feel where there's almost this infrastructure at the bottom that isn't necessarily part of the platform. And then you're layering on all the way up to the developers doing things. The way you're running all of your, as said here, Gen AI things in the middle, that lovely middle part of the sandwich. And then you're thinking about how we interface with the developers on top, and whether it's through APIs or things like that. And this is one of the talks that I think if you're interested in the kind of organizational stuff, I think it's a good sort of proposition of how you might go about organizing things. So that's always a fun trick in a presentation, is just to point you at a bunch of diagrams and tell you what you're looking at. It's more of a reference for you to consume at some other point when you want to stare at diagrams and ponder our existence as people who work in IT. But I think over those three things, right? Knowing what a platform is, and then starting to think about the various things you would want to do to support how AI is used in your organization, you can start to piece together on your own whiteboard what your platform might look like. Now, like I said, there's a lot of people figuring things out, kind of speculation, sorting out what's going on. But I think everyone would agree that there's one, and I'm going to cheat here, there's actually two, but there's one major thing that you want. And that is putting some kind of broker or gateway or proxy person in the middle, choke point, control point, whatever it may be. Putting that in the middle right away would be a great thing to have learned after 40 to 50 years of computing. That right away, when there's a bunch of developers who want to use something, you immediately want to be the center of how they use that thing and then spread it out to the actual thing that they're doing. It's a fun lesson that we get to learn every 5 years. So get ready for thrilling relearning. But if you don't want to relearn that and you'd rather do something else with your time, this would be the main thing that I would start thinking about, is how do we ensure that all the developers go to us and then we can observe, control, apply policy, and then pass along to whatever they want, instead of allowing them to go to those things directly? Because as should be obvious, once you allow developers to go to other services directly, you have virtually no control other than sending them emails about things they should and should not be doing. So, in the greatest platform in the world, this is the way that we've thought about doing it, right? And there's nothing revelatory about it. It's just, this is that paradox part that I was talking about is, yeah, that's how you would do a service, right? You would put this in place. But I think that's something that not everyone is figuring out so much. Now, the second thing that I think would be good to start getting a hold of is making sure you have a developer framework that integrates with the way you want to do brokering. Now, in our world of enterprise developers, it's a lot of Java. And so there's something like SREday that like integrates with all of this stuff very well. But I think part of what a platform engineer should be doing that differentiates them from whatever came before that is they're thinking about going into the daily activities of a developer and trying to guide that actual framework to work with the platform instead of the other way around. When you put this kind of gateway or whatever you want to call it in place, if you can also bring to the developers or make work with what they're using, whatever frameworks they have, that is also going to allow you to do a lot of your platform engineering stuff a lot more easier. You'll have a more fun time doing it, or at least less stressful. So then finally, that was a little tour of tech stuff, if you will, of stacks. And I think there are some interesting practices, as I was saying, mindsets or ways of going about doing things that have come up a lot and that people have encountered. And I think the first one is it's always good to remember this sort of principle of platform engineering. Now, before we said platform engineering, I think it was Humanitech who coined and pressed that. Remember when they like killed off DevOps? It was a great launch of the whole thing for platform engineering. Always good to shoot your predecessor. Very Greek, I guess. Ancient Greek. Nowadays, I think they don't do that in Greece. Anyways, it's good to remember that it used to be called platform as a product, right? And this was even from DevOps and definitely from, if you remember, IT service management. I don't know if there's any big ITIL fans out there. But this is a big shift in how people thought about thinking about platforms, which is, so I'm building this set of capabilities, this platform. Developers are going to use it. What if I made it so they liked it and it was like good for them? What if I thought about it as a product and I thought about them as the customers of it? And I paid attention to if this product I was building was like good for them, right? And like service their needs. So that's what this platform as a product notion is. And I think it's good to be reminded of that because when it comes to a new capability, a new thing that you're adding in like AI, it's good to reassess who your customers are. And I think this, like in talking with people and seeing what they're doing, I think there's 3 customers so far. And 2 of these are, one of them is the same people, but with a different, if you know the phrase, job to be done, a different thing they want to do. And one of them is kind of a net new customer for platform engineers. So first, on your right side, what you can see is what you, platform engineer, would normally do. And that is supporting whatever services, whatever kind of runtime configuration, all of that infrastructure stuff that an application developer would need that is not the application development code. And that's like, for AI stuff, it's this idea of putting AI in your applications, right? The issue here is that maybe you have found more, but there's not really that many examples of what this is out there yet. It doesn't really come up that much. Like at best, I've seen some people thinking about what I would call like sloppy integration, which here you can see a demo of it is, let's say you're doing some insurance claims processing and you've got all these different data sources and you're the claims processor and you can, as they would say in this field, deterministically stick tough stuff together from your databases and other sources. But you might also, if you realize the MCP dream of existence or agentic or whatever you want to call it, you might also just be able to go out, bring up an AI, give it access to this data and say, I don't know, you figure it out. Go look at all of the data sources that we have. And in the same way, you might use like Claude Code or try to have some chat thing come up with a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. You're basically like, should I pay this person for that rec? Look at all the data sources that I have and give me an opinion. And that's something you could code into an application. And so you can think about situations like that. But I would I would think a lot about, so is there a situation where people are using AI stuff that isn't one of the next 2 following? And instead is hidden behind the application code that they're using, because I find those very difficult to find. So the other 2, going oddly enough non-Western reading style, going right to left, is the most probably talked about, and I don't know if it's actually the biggest workload, but in our area, it's the one that everyone knows about and does, and that is just helping out programmers, right? Being tools for the programmers, not things that the programmers use. And in that case, What's interesting there is that there are several companies that would really like the benefit of having AI help write out code, but they're like, doesn't seem like a good idea to send all of our stuff to another service. And those companies are a little weird in their ethics of how they do things and shifty, which is fine. I use them all the time and ask them to tell me what's wrong with me and get advice, medical stuff. So I trust them. But other enterprises, not always so interested in it. But so you might be thinking, if we're a platform engineer running inference and models, are we the ones responsible for running that internal service that developers use for helping them out with programming? And there's an interesting talk from our Explore conference. I'm sure you can read this tiny slide from there. But there's it's also worth thinking through. So if we look at the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, but like all of the end-to-end processes that a developer does, where are little parts that you could fit AI into? And then is that also something that a platform engineer is responsible for, let's say, running the backend for? And if not them, who? Hopefully it's not the developers doing it. I don't know if you've encountered this, but anytime you have a developer run like the infrastructure, you get a bunch of talks at conferences like this for years later about how to fix that. So it's probably good to head that off before it happens. But this is a potential new customer for the platform. And then finally, a customer that I don't think platform engineers have had very much, and this goes back to that talk from the three-dimensional square people about Goose, is in the same way that developers want to use it in their tools, probably the most use of AI at the moment is for people internally, the normals, if you will, using a chat app to do their business, right? And something like Goose, as pictured here, it's an open source chat app that you can add whatever models you want to it. Great fun stuff, right? And so if you're using your own private cloud or private AI hosted stuff, again, is the platform engineer responsible for running that? Or who would be responsible for running that? I think platform engineers are probably very well positioned to run that service, but it's a new type of customer. And that talk is great because you can see the people who are supporting this inside Block coming to that platform as a product conclusion. They start to really think about how we product manage this whole service that we're providing there. So next, there was this time back in the lovely days of digital transformation, and maybe a little before, where we had something called a Cloud Center of Excellence, which, as I recall, was a cloud center of killing your dreams, which would often happen there. And similarly, or at least putting your dreams to bed, maybe at more gentle places. So similarly, when you're introducing AI things, like you do need to have policy, set up how you want to use it, all sorts of weird stuff going on. And so this is another thing that we've learned in the past is if you're going to have a center of excellence, one, probably don't call it that, but two, you want to make sure that you're more rapid. You want the fastest way of going through that cycle. And when I've talked with a couple of people, what they've figured out is that, sure, you could have all sorts of people involved there, but the two roles that you especially need are the lawyers, not really known for being fast, and the security people, who generally know what they're doing, and they generally can work fast if you allow them to. And so having those two groups on your policy board is one way of speeding up this process and not putting your dreams to bed, as it were. So it's a good starting point for that. So then finally, I think this is a principle at the moment that we had last time when we were trying to figure out software, is that when it comes to this AI stuff, if you don't know what you're doing, you should do a lot of it quickly, right? And what that means is you should experiment and learn and figure out what's going on. The longer your cycle for testing out your theory, whether you know it's a theory or not, of what's happening, the longer it's going to be that you get feedback and the longer it's going to take you to recover from not knowing what you're doing. So you want to put in place more of a rapid cycle of doing things, which is one of the foundational things of platform engineering, right? It's supposed to support very rapid ways of doing things, be very adaptive to it, and it has that whole way of going about it. And then finally, if you're interested in more research on that and even how you can think about using the greatest platform in the world, we have this great AI starter kit. I'm not supposed to say you can use it free for 90 days, but you can have a trial for 90 days that you don't pay for. So there's that. Anyways, we wrote up a lot of stuff here that I haven't gone over, including about marketing, doing the internal marketing and community building for your kind of AI initiatives, which I think is fun because I wrote it all. So it was very enjoyable. Excellent stuff. But you should check that out. So that's it. You can get the slides for this if you wanted to click on links, which are very difficult in a medium like this. And thanks for the time. It's always nice to talk with people.